From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
That moment, I teared up. I choked. I had just a little trouble getting the words out.
President Kennedy at Dallas Airport this morning.
After reporting for several hours, I went into my office. It was right off the newsroom floor there. And now, I'd been reporting all afternoon that all across America, telephone lines were tied up, jammed. But somehow it just hadn't occurred to me that it was going to affect me. I got into my office, and I wanted to call Betsy, my wife. I wanted to hear a friendly, non-professional voice to commiserate with. And I saw that both of my phones, with 6 lines on each, all lighted up. I suddenly realized that we at CBS also had jammed phone lines. Well, suddenly one of those lines cleared, and I grabbed the phone quickly, hoping I'd get an outside line. And unfortunately, there was another call coming in. It was a terribly affected Eastern-type voice. "Hello." And I said, "Hello." And she said, "I'd like to speak to someone in charge of CBS News." And I said, "Well, you're speaking to CBS News, madam." And she said, "Well, I'd like to complain about CBS having on the air at this terrible moment that awful man, Walter Cronkite, crying those phony crocodile tears when everybody knows he hated John Kennedy." This was the first voice I'm hearing after reporting this horrible event, and I never hated John Kennedy in the first place. And I said, "Madam, what is your name?" And she gave me one of those, very upper-class, hyphenated names, Smith Lawley Johnson or something like that, I don't know. And then she gave me an address, and that was on Park Avenue, as if to impress me with her social standing. Well, I said, "Mrs. Smith Lawley Johnson, you're speaking to Walter Cronkite, and you, madam, are a damn idiot." Slammed up the phone. I sat back, really upset. And then I realized, whoa, hyphenated name, that address on Park Avenue, she's got to be a friend of Bill Paley's, our chairman. And for a moment, I just kind of thought that might be my last phone call at CBS.
The expressions of sorrow, of course, have come from all segments of our population.
CBS stayed on the air for 4 days with no commercial breaks. We followed the events in Dallas and Washington, D.C., and the reaction from across the nation and around the world.
We just got the word that Lyndon B. Johnson has been sworn in as the President of the United States. He was sworn in at 1:38 Central Standard Time. That was 2:38.
Some people have suggested that we deliberately selected our stories and images that weekend in order to calm a grieving nation. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. We reported the story just as it unfolded, no matter where it took us. We covered the return of the late president's body to Washington. And a new president as he picked up the fallen mantle of leadership.
We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. For me, it is a deep personal tragedy. I know that the world shares the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bear. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask for your help and God's.
We reported the arrest of the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald.
This is the man charged with the murder of President Kennedy as he is led from the police headquarters in Dallas.
And And then, while the country was still in shock from one murder, there came another. Shown live on television, the assassination of the assassin.
Lee Harold Oswald has been shot. The shot came from a man wearing a black hat and a coat. Here comes Oswald. He is ashen and unconscious at this time, now being moved in. He's not moving.
It just seemed impossible. The shock of another murder while there was still a president left to bury. The 4 dark days ended with the final goodbyes to a fallen leader.
Tonight there will be few Americans who will go to bed without carrying with them a sense that somehow they have failed. If in the search of our conscience we find a new dedication to the American concepts that brook no political, sectional, religious, or racial divisions, then maybe it may yet be possible to say that John Fitzgerald Kennedy did not die in vain. That's the way it is. Monday, November 25th, 1963. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
I believe that the times require imagination and courage and perseverance. I'm asking each of you to be pioneers towards that new frontier.
Kennedy's use of television created a whole new image of the presidency. It might be said that his was the first television presidency, even unto its tragic end. During those 4 dark days in November, a nation gathered around its television sets and grieved together. By the time Kennedy was buried, 96% of Americans had seen on television some part of the assassination coverage. It was inevitable. The grief over the president's death turned to suspicions of conspiracy. The public simply found it hard to believe that this devastation could have been the act of one man alone, a man murdered before he could even be judged. Just a week after Kennedy's death, President Johnson appointed a commission under Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren to investigate the assassination. And for 10 months, that group of distinguished Americans researched the possibility of a conspiracy. And they found none. At CBS, we had some doubts about the commission's findings, as everybody else did. In 1966, a Gallup poll found that 6 out of 10 Americans did not believe the Warren report. Well, there seemed to be so many leads that indicated possible connections between Oswald and various groups, particularly the Cubans. So 2 years after the report was issued, we spent a lot of money, more than $500,000, when $500,000 was $500,000, and we did our own investigation.
This is a CBS News inquiry, the Warren Report.
This is what a rifleman would see from a 6th-floor window if he tracked an automobile down Elm Street in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, Texas. This is a marksman firing 3 shots from a Mannlicher Carcano rifle at a target below him and moving away. These 2 reenactments represent the heart of the Warren Report. In the view of the Warren Commission, they describe fully the circumstances of the assassination of President Kennedy. But is there more to this story than the Warren Report ever discovered?
For 9 months, I was part of a CBS News task force led by executive producer Les Midgley. We went after what we perceived to be the biggest holes in the Commission's report. We built a tower and a car track which matched exactly the Dallas Plaza where the assassination took place. And we fired a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, like the one Lee Harvey Oswald used, to see if 3 shots could have been fired in that time from the same gun. And we shot bullets through blocks of gelatin to see how human tissue would have damaged the bullet said to have hit both Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. And even though we went into it disbelieving the Warren Report, our research ended up establishing that all of the Commission's judgments actually were well taken. And we put this conclusion on the air, of course.
Did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot President Kennedy? CBS News concludes that he did. Measured against the alternatives, the Warren Commission report is the easiest to believe, and that is all the report claims. But we have found also that there has been a loss of morale, a loss of confidence among the American people toward their own government and the men who serve it. And that is perhaps more wounding than the assassination itself.
Our investigation helped quiet my doubts, but a lot of people still suspected that Oswald was part of a conspiracy. Even President Lyndon Johnson, after he left office, told me that he had never entirely dismissed the idea that what he called an international conspiracy was involved.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
You mean you still feel that there might have been?
Well, I have not completely discounted.
Even when I pressed him on it, Johnson simply refused to name those he suspected. We know now what we didn't know then, that during the Kennedy administration, the CIA had plotted to assassinate the Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Now, the FBI and the CIA didn't tell the Warren Commission about those clandestine activities. I'm not sure that it would have changed the Commission's report, but I sure would have liked to interview the head of the Cuban intelligence after that failed attempt on Castro's life. But the Commission's ignorance about a possible Cuban act of revenge is just one of the reasons for the proliferation of conspiracy theories about the Kennedy murder. The most striking, and I think the most shameful of all of those theories, done with Hollywood glitz, of course, is Oliver Stone's movie JFK. Stone combined documentary and fictional footage in a very clever way that absolutely obliterates the truth.
President Kennedy died at
He
1
uses the
p.m.
CBS footage
Central
of my
Standard
announcing
Time.
the president's death to establish the reality that he avoids in most of the film. His preposterous theory is that top echelons of the U.S. government committed the Kennedy assassination in order to put Lyndon Johnson in the White House. That work of fiction is dangerous. It seriously misleads a whole generation of Americans who weren't alive at that time into an extremely faulty understanding of an important part of their history. And furthermore, if such a conspiracy or any other existed, I don't believe for a minute that it could have been covered up for almost 40 years. A secret that big just isn't that easy to keep. The murder of President Kennedy left us with a feeling of promise unfulfilled. How successful his administration would have been remains forever unknown. President Johnson invoked the martyred president's legacy. He passed the most comprehensive civil rights legislation ever, and then he pushed through Congress a breathtakingly ambitious war on poverty. But all the while, the nation continued to dream of Camelot and what might have been.